Welcome to Cross Border Interviews, the show where we sit down with local elected leaders from across Canada. Now, our mission on this show is quite simple. Shine a light on the dedicated individuals who day in and day out work around the council tables to shape the communities that we call home. And for today's episode, we are honored to have sat down in person in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, in the Saskatoon City Council chambers with Ward 10 Saskatoon Councillor Zach Jeffries for a one-on-one interview where we explored his duty to serve, his community, and of course, some of the great tourism spots. Across Canada, our cities, towns, villages, and rural communities are alive with stories waiting to be told. Stories of innovation and economic development, resilience in the face of the housing challenges, and the financial hurdles municipalities overcome every day. At the Cross Border Network, we bring these stories to life. From coast to coast to coast, we're connecting Canadians to the issues shaping our communities and showcasing the people working tirelessly to make them thrive. With your support, we can expand our reach, amplify more voices, and shine a light on the challenges and triumphs of municipal life. For as little as $3.99 a month, you can help us grow and continue sharing the stories that matter most. Join us today and be part of this important mission. Together, we can tell more stories, build stronger communities, and make a real difference. Support the Cross Border Network now. Visit www.crossborderinterviews.ca today.
Councillor, I want to thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about yourself, your duty to serve, and my favorite subject, municipalities. So thank you so much. And I should say, I've done this for over 800 episodes with municipal leaders from across Canada. This is the very first interview I've ever done in a council chambers with the councillor sitting in a seat. So thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome. We're hospitable in Saskatoon and want to give you the full experience.
Awesome. So I want to start very simply, but very overarching. Where did your sense of duty to serve the people of Saskatoon come from?
That's an excellent question, and it's one that I could weave you a long and winding story about that. But the fact is that I remember from a very early age in elementary school being involved in different community things as a volunteer. One particular project that comes to mind for me is I remember I was in the 6th grade. It was the end of August at the beginning of that grade, and a buddy of mine and I were outside. It was still hot, that end of summer type of day where we wanted just a bit of shade to sit and talk. And there were no trees in the back schoolyard where we went to school here in Saskatoon in the neighborhood of Sutherland. So we went to the principal and said, what can we do about this? Do we start a petition? Do we ask someone to plant some trees for us? How do we go about this? And he said, well, why don't we get an idea of the project that we want to do, and you folks, you kids can have some agency and in fact can run it. So we had the chance to do everything from raising money, deciding what we wanted to do on our playground. We made presentations to Kinsmen and Rotary and talked to local business owners. We involved other students in the project. And by the end of it, we had raised $50,000. We had actually gotten some big improvements made in our schoolyard. But in addition to that, we found that we engaged with dozens and dozens of kids, as well as parents getting involved, local businesses. And I started to realize the power of bringing people together and what happens when you have people who are very committed to making change and to making a positive improvement in their community. And that was a formative experience for me where I started to understand what this all means. And in addition to that, in terms of actually eventually running, I am a bit of a political geek. I'm sure you don't want to get too much into that, but I really did, when it came to that duty to serve, understood what it meant to bring people together. And that's at its foundation what we see at the municipal level, folks who aren't playing partisan games, people who aren't involved in adversarial politics. They're trying to build consensus and really trying to build community.
You could have chosen many different routes after that grade 6 sort of awakening of the political idealism in you. What made you decide municipal was where it was going to start? Because, you look at your resume, you look at your background, you could have chosen many different routes, but you chose municipal. Was it always going to be municipal where you're going to start off? Could you have gone to school board? But you chose municipal. What was the catalyst to say municipal is where Zach needs to be to make a big difference?
Did you ever play SimCity as a kid?
I certainly did. SimCity 2000, SimCity 3000, and I'd be the one who was always broke by the time the first year.
Yeah, I mean, there were cheat codes that you can use in those things. Unfortunately, those don't really work unless there's
the real world. No,
there's no magic federal program that just funds everything. But I played a lot of SimCity when I was a kid. I understood how much fun it could be to dream about what a community looks like. And I remember at some point, by the time I was 10 or 12, I was also hooked on watching the Monday night city council meetings on Shaw TV. Like I said, political geekiness was there, and it just so happened that I really enjoyed the municipal piece.
Did mom and dad have a political vote?
No.
So you're the black sheep.
I am the black sheep. I totally am. The thing that actually, I'll just briefly say, is that when we have a chance as folks involved in politics to engage with younger people in our community, that can leave a lasting impact, and those are memories that can stick around. I remember in 1994, I was in grade 3, and we were having an election. It was a big election. There had just been a municipal strike. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on, such that a whole pile of people were running for council. And in the district that I lived in, Ward 10, we had a whole pile of candidates come by our grade 3 classroom, and then we had a vote. Not all of them came who were running, but the one that I guess left an impression on me about reaching out in community, the one that ultimately won our vote in grade 3, was a guy by the name of Don Atchison. And yeah, so Don was first elected to serve as the councillor in Ward 10 in 1994. And yeah, he became mayor in 2003. And it was that kind of commitment that he showed to actually reaching out to people, helping even folks who were only, not even halfway to being old enough to vote, talking about and connecting into the political process. So there were a few of those little things along the way where I got a chance to see some of those folks in action on council and thought about building cities and building community, getting the chance to actually have real life experience doing that with some volunteer things. And putting all of that together became a pretty potent combination to wanting to actually pursue this level of politics and this level of service.
You talk about memories, and there's one memory that I can remember. The very first time I put my name on a ballot was in 2010. It was for a municipal council, and I remember walking into that ballot box and seeing my name beside that big circle where you would put your X. Do you remember that moment? Seeing your name on the ballot the very first time?
I remember seeing my name on some ballots and running for student leadership council back in the day, of course.
There's a big difference than school board to school leadership to municipal governance, isn't there?
Well, there was actually one election that I remember very clearly. In Saskatchewan here, high school starts, it's grade 9 through 12. And I remember running for SRC in grade 9, and I lost. And I thought, hey, I did all the things that seemed important. I had a real plan for certain things that folks wanted to be different or be fixed. I thought about ways that we would pay for them. I put those ideas forward, and then I lost to someone who was more popular than me. And I remember being so angry that, this was just a popularity contest. I can't wait until you end up with a level of politics somewhere else where it's not a popularity contest. But at its core, it's not about popularity. It really is about people. And sometimes you have to put forward ideas that not only are good ideas, but ideas that people connect to and that they like and they get excited about you. So that was kind of a formative experience to lose an election in grade 9. It made me think about what it means to be successful in politics and the things that need to happen. But yes, the first time I saw my name on a ballot, I remember it very, very clearly. I was voting in advance. at City Hall in 2012 for the municipal election. And after having worked for so many other people, whether it was as a volunteer all the way up to a campaign manager, you get the feels seeing your name there and knowing that even if it didn't work out and I hadn't been elected in that particular race, that it was an experience that was completely worthwhile because of the conversations I was able to have and the people I was able to meet.
So your first outing, you get elected, which you've defeated an incumbent at the time. That's a big win, and that's a big momentous occasion across any municipality, because to defeat an incumbent, it's huge. But now you've been in office for 3 terms. Well, 2 terms, and you're currently starting your 3rd term.
4th, actually.
4th.
Yeah.
Oh, can't do basic math here.
Not to correct you. We just had an election,
okay,
so
3 terms, which you were acclaimed in the last election. Do elections get easier as time goes on, or do you still put the same energy that you first put in that first campaign, where you're running against an incumbent as you potentially would have in the last campaign if someone would have ran against you?
Of course, the last campaign here in 2024, it was different.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. When you're out knocking on doors and you know that there's no one running against you, it's not the same level of voter contact. And the reason I say that is because you feel like you can be freer to have long conversations with people. Whereas if you're on an election campaign, you know that you need to meet as many people as possible. Your campaign team is pulling you away if you've talked to someone for more than 3 or 4 minutes on the doorstep.
They would hate this time.
They would. No question. And if we were doing it, they'd say, why don't we do it first thing in the morning when we're not door knocking?
Yeah.
But if I think back to the last campaign that I had the chance to be involved in, where it was a little more normal, although it was COVID, it was the election in 2020, we hit as a team more doors, had more voter contact, more conversations than I had had in any of those previous campaigns. And that was my 3rd one by that point. So I'm very fortunate to have a team of people who not only are very supportive of me, but they're really good at helping me to connect with people out in the community. So we got to a lot of doors. We got to over 13,000 doors in 2020 during COVID. And that was definitely more than we got to in any of those previous campaigns. So, which is the long way of saying I haven't really let off the gas when it comes to election time. And there's all sorts of things throughout the term too that you understand are valuable in keeping that connection with the people I serve.
Now, 4 terms in, I would hazard a guess that I can say this with all certainty, that you've come to the realization that not 100% of the people are ever going to agree with you on any certain issue you vote on in this room, in council chambers. There's always going to be people who say, you should have done further, you should have done less, this isn't the government's job. There's always going to be detractors. How do you, and I say this as a councillor, how do you make the good governance vote in the best interest of the entire community, knowing that there's always going to be some people who just do not believe you're doing the right thing?
At a certain point, you do grow some thicker skin.
Does it take time?
I think it depends on a person's personality. Okay. It can take time. I think there are things today that I take less personally than I would have 12 years ago. I can't think of a specific example, but I understand now that...
Do the decisions get easier?
I don't think some of the decisions necessarily get easier weighing and balancing all the inputs, but the emotional piece of it does change. The weight of some of the decisions on your own mental space, that changes a little bit. The input sometimes on things that are controversial, things that are really impactful to community, that doesn't necessarily get easier when you know that you've read all the reports, you've heard from residents that you represent on both sides of an issue, you've heard from people around the city on both sides of an issue, and you've also done your own reading and you know, even outside of an issue where you'd eventually like to go, and you try to balance all of that, and there's no that part doesn't get easier, because this is not the kind of position where you can just simply say, I'm just going to poll the residents that I represent and ask what they think, or simply defer to your administration and say, I'm going to do what they think. The reason that politicians are here in the first place is because we get to be a sponge for all of these different sources of information, and we get to make imperfect decisions with limited resources, and you have to draw lines somewhere, and that just the very nature of it is it's not easy. And I don't say that as a complaint, because it's not, but I'd say the decisions don't necessarily get easier. In fact, the issues that we're dealing with, in fact, they're getting more difficult. But sometimes the losing sleep at night doesn't happen in the same way when you get an angry phone call.
Well, I just want to pick up on that for a second, because we all have morals and we all have values that we hold true to ourselves and who we believe we are. But as an elected representative, and I don't know this for certainty, I did not do any background to say this vote on October 12th, not going to happen right here. But I would imagine that there's times when the loud voices that you hear from residents, from administration, say one thing, but your internal self goes, but I think this is the way we should go. Who wins in that internal struggle? Is it the voters, or is it the internal Zach?
They're both inputs. There's no question there.
You can raise your hand once.
You can only raise your hand once. With that said, the beautiful thing, once you've been around the table long enough, and I'm not trying to weave this into a non-answer, but sometimes you can change the motion on the floor. You can change and do something a little bit different than the administrative recommendation, instead of just doing that or doing nothing, or doing the options that are in front of you. You start to understand, when you've been here for a long time, the tools that are available and how you weave all these different pieces together. And that can be really powerful to finding something that balances those pieces when you're conflicted between the way that you think something should happen and the way that residents you represent think things should happen. With that said, I've often said to colleagues of mine, and I do this sometimes myself, is if you're caught in a spot where you're hearing a lot of voices, you're hearing a lot of sometimes angry people, and I would never discount that. I think people actually caring about their city is a good thing. I would much rather have people be angry and engaged than apathetic and totally checked out about their community. I would much rather have that. It shows people, if you'll excuse the language, give a shit. And
okay, so
But what I tell folks to do is go knock some doors.
Yeah.
Go show up at people's door unannounced, ask them how things are going, ask their opinion, and you'll sometimes find that people who are not actively engaged in an issue and actively angry about it are open to having a conversation, can be very reasonable, and might have a point of view that doesn't reflect always what you hear from what people like to call the squeaky wheels. So those are things that I think about and in fact can do in some of those cases.
There's an analogy when it comes to municipal government, the apathetic nature, and I forget who told me it. I think it was someone from Saskatchewan at the last year's SULA, but 5% of the population is tuned in. They're engaged. They're the ones who show up to the council meetings. They're the ones who voice their opinions. Then there's 15% of the population who will pay attention to what the 5% is doing. But then there's that 80% who, as long as my water's turned on and my garbage is picked up, I put my garbage out, we really don't care what the city's doing. When you talk about that apathetic nature, do you see the same people always voicing their concerns, or do you try to go out and, like you said, knock the doors who may not often give you their feedback because they have other things to do, because they've elected you to make the tough decisions? And really, why should I voice my concern because he's doing a good job?
I try to create those spaces for people to have conversations that matter to them, even if they're not the ones who want to pick up the phone and call call their local politician, whether it's sitting in the coffee shop that's adjacent to, or it's right next to the tills at the co-op food store in Ward 10, and doing something called Coffee with Your Councillor, where some people, yes, they will show up with a list. They'll and other things. I had a guy show up one time with a giant photo of something. He brought it in a big black garbage bag, and I was thinking, what the heck are you carrying into the store? And I knew he was coming to talk to me because I've seen him before at town hall meetings and things like that. So I was like, oh man, like what's in the bag, dude? But anything from that, the very engaged folks, people who I've got folks who come out who don't have any questions, but they just want to listen. They're really curious. And other people who will see, hey, Zach's there. I have a quick question. I'm curious about something. And they're just out buying bananas and muffins on a Saturday morning, and they'll pop by and say hi because they see that I'm there. So things like that, whether it's that or a town hall meeting, I host an annual barbecue. That's not something that I don't think any of my council colleagues have done. And that's not to say that, it's not to say you're supposed to do that, but that's something that was important to me. And the last one that we held, I guess on a day that wasn't raining, we had an impact on attendance that year. But the last one we held on a nice sunny day, we had 2,200 people come out. Wow. And
so people are engaged.
People are engaged. And I mean, I have the good fortune to represent an area that tends to have higher voter turnout, that tends to have higher engagement. But even beyond that, people aren't just coming out to a community event like that because you threw a billboard up. They're coming out because that conversation and those lines of communication stay open. I've got a list for text messages to remind people of things, or emails and phone calls. We do those types of things to try to keep that level of engagement up. And it doesn't mean that every time there's a vote in council chambers that you're going to hear from me and have me saying, hey, how should I vote? But it is to say that we try, I and folks around me, to keep some of those engagement things that aren't just the angry phone call, keep those options open.
You say you enjoy when people stop you on the street and have that conversation, or see you out grabbing something. How long does it take you to grab a carton of milk these days as a councillor? Do people stop you and say, oh, it's the councillor, so I'm going to spend 20 minutes with him while he's in the middle of the grabbing milk? Or are you comfortable with that lifestyle now?
I'm comfortable with that. There are days where it doesn't happen. It feels like it's either a desert or it's a rainstorm. Either no one stops you and nothing happens, or 4 people will do it. And I enjoy those conversations most of the time. I was having a chat with someone who's a friend recently, who's looking to get into politics and thinking about running. And I said to her, well, she was commenting that if she got elected, she'd love to engage with people and do all these things. And I said, but you go to the grocery store in your sweatpants. You're going to have to think about that type of thing and what you might have to change. And she said, no, I'm not changing that. I'm still doing that. I'm going to be of the people. I'm like, great. Enjoy. I think that's really cool. But I mostly enjoy it unless I'm in a hurry. And
have you found the balance? Because one of the things I often hear from prospective candidates who are about to get involved in the municipal governance level is you're on 24/7. You go out in your community, you are councillor. You're no longer just Zach, right? You are Councillor Jeffries the entire time. When you go to the restaurant, you're councillor. You don't go to Ottawa to do your job. You don't go to Regina to do your job. You are in Saskatoon 24/7, 7 days a week. Have you struck the balance of being just Zach and then being councillor?
Sure. I mean, the thing that's interesting is when you've been at this for even a couple of years in, sometimes it's not so much that people are stopping you in some cases. It's that you can see those eyes, the eyes, they stop as they're scanning a room, and they're like, I know you, and they're either, I know you, you're my city councillor, or it's, I know you, but I can't quite place you. And you can feel that, you can sense it. And I don't mind that. I'm just keenly aware that it's really important to understand that even if you're not on in terms of conversation, you are someone who serves the public, and just keeping that in mind at all times is pretty key. I have to keep my nose pretty clean. It's not like going out when you're 19 and doing silly things at the bar and everything else. But so that's certainly a factor and something that you do think about. But I think there's a way to strike that balance too. Sometimes we have to realize that we can't or shouldn't always take ourselves too seriously. And one of the things that happened about 4 years ago, maybe 3.5, one of my council colleagues who used to be in radio, who was and is a very talented guy when it comes to emceeing events and everything else. His name is David Curtin. He was emceeing a stand-up comedy show. And he said, Zach, he hadn't been on council for very long. He said, Zach, some people have said you're pretty funny, and I think you are too. You should come and do a stand-up set. And that's something that I had been interested in doing for quite some time. So I did. I went and I did it. And I've done it a few times since. In fact, the 25th of March, I'm up again and doing it. So if I don't think you'll be here that time, but no, actually there was a slot I was offered yesterday, and I had said no, I'll do the one at the end of March. So and I've gotten up there and I've made jokes about being a politician and some of the weird things that happen in community, what it means to run for office. I've also told jokes about relationships and my mom and Christmas and all sorts of things. So maybe that's
humanize yourself.
Well, I am who I am, and I think perhaps that's one of the things that I enjoy about municipal politics is we're not tethered to this idea that you are there to represent a party or represent a leader. You get to be you. And if I'm being authentically myself, as I've tried more to be the longer I've been doing this, it means that sometimes, I'll go and tell jokes. It means that sometimes I'll be a goofball, and that's who I am. So I encourage people, especially at this level, is to, keep your nose clean. Understand that you serve the public. Understand that you've got a reputation to uphold. But at the same time, it's okay to be yourself.
I want to turn to the city of Saskatoon as a whole now. And before I do this, I'm going to preface it. So if you've heard the spiel before, just fast forward about 10 seconds. This is a conversation between the councillor and myself. This is not a motion of council, not a policy of council, not a direction of council. He is one vote on the entire council. He needs a majority of the people who sit around this table, as we're recording, to vote in favor of a motion or defeat a motion. So this is his opinion and his opinion alone. It may line up with what's going on at council, but still he's speaking on behalf of himself, not the entire council. With that being said, Councillor, as of recording this at the beginning of March 2025, what do you see, in your opinion, as the biggest challenge or challenges facing the city of Saskatoon today?
The biggest challenge we're seeing right now, there's two. One is the question of housing and homelessness. We are seeing in our community, and I know this is happening in other parts of Canada, where we're just, the number of folks who don't have a regular stable home is growing. It's a huge concern. And when you've lived in one place your entire life, I know at one level that sounds unexciting, but at another level, it gives you that context for what your community, you know how it's felt in the past, you know how it's been in the past, and you see how it is today. And seeing the number of people experiencing homelessness in our city is absolutely heartbreaking. And we have been trying everything that we can to muster the power of the municipality, of course, the level of government that only has 9 cents out of every tax dollar that people pay, to do our part. And thinking about conversations that we've had in the last few weeks, even around our role in temporary homeless shelters, permanent homeless shelters, affordable housing, encouraging more market rentals to come into play. These are all pieces that connect into this problem and this question. And then there's another piece around advocacy that we're involved in. So that's one of the top issues. Those are some of the ways that we're thinking about how we tackle it. And the other one that we're seeing really acutely here, especially at this time in March of 2025, is the toxic drug crisis. I don't know if you've seen in the news here, even in the last few days, the number of people, we've got a bad batch of drugs that have a much higher proportion of fentanyl in them. And in fact, some ingredients that are cause someone's reaction to be resistant to Narcan intervention, that's in our city right now. And once again, that's something where we have some tools available, but not all the tools. And we're mustering all the support that we can possibly do from the federal and provincial levels of government to try to tackle this as well. So we've done things around emergency supports within our fire department and helping to actually manage and deal with all the things around this. We've got work that our police services are doing, and then just generally, we do know that when people are experiencing homelessness, that there are other vulnerabilities that start to come into play. And I'm not trying to suggest that these two are inextricably interconnected, but there are definitely connections between being in a vulnerable position without a home and then finding yourself in other vulnerable situations. So those are two of the big things that we're facing as a community right now. I am fortunate that I represent an area that hasn't been as impacted, where you see the homelessness in Ward 10, or you see so we're not seeing that. We're not seeing the toxic drug crisis in the same way, but those issues impact us just the same. And in fact, we know, and you can take a look at a map where we've had calls with overdoses, and that doesn't respect socioeconomic boundaries. It doesn't respect neighborhood boundaries, and it doesn't respect level of income. And that's something that we have to realize and think that this is not about the other. This is not some neighborhood that is worse off. This is an all of us problem. So those are two of the big things that weigh on my mind.
Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate with you right now.
Of course.
Councillor. Now I'm one of these, like you, a political nerd. I grew up learning about the jurisdictional responsibilities that the municipality plays, the federal government plays, and the provincial government plays. If you asked me 10 years ago, I would have said mental health and addiction, homelessness is not a municipal issue. It is becoming a municipal issue more and more as days go on. How do municipalities solve these issues when it's traditionally not in their purview to solve these issues? Because you have a limited supply of money every year that you get from the province, that you get from property taxes, and any money you use towards solving issues, and I understand they are completely the right issues to try to be tackling right now, but aging infrastructure is a big challenge right now. Getting infrastructure into new subdivisions so we can build more houses to get these affordable homes on the market so people can buy and rent affordable places to live. That is the basics of what municipal governments are. Do you find yourself in today's world, in today's council, dealing with more provincial jurisdictional issues that are not traditionally seen in the municipal realm?
Yes.
Okay. Second question. Is the province doing enough? From your perspective, as councillor, is the province doing enough to help the city of Saskatoon to address these issues?
I think we've seen some movement recently from the provincial government in Saskatchewan towards taking more and better responsibility for some of the issues we're facing, for example, on the question of homelessness. But I would say that while appreciated, I think that level of government and that order of government needs to understand that for example, coming to Saskatoon and Regina with the same amount of money to deal with homelessness and to try to get shelters built is not going to, that's not sufficient for a city like Saskatoon. We are almost 25% larger in the city proper. We have outlying areas, and we're a service center for really all of northern Saskatchewan. So we end up with feeling those issues more acutely for many, many reasons. So I'd say, yeah, the provincial government isn't quite where they need to be, but I don't want to say that's on us, but we have a role to play to help them understand that. We've been playing that role. So when it comes to these issues, part of it is that we have an advocacy role. I think we're playing that strongly. We have Mayor Block going down to the provincial budget next week, and she not only will be saying thank you for some excellent investments that we've seen from the provincial government, for example, in revenue sharing, but also to say that we're on the front lines of things in our community with our community support officers, with our firefighters, with our police officers who are seeing what's happening, and we need you to do more. So there's an advocacy role. Some of it is where we're taking on responsibility that either it's not us, and it's kind of a see something, say something, do something.
Yeah.
And when you see people in certain really vulnerable situations, and you have some capacity, for example, with a community support officer or with some of your other employees to do something, you feel compelled to do that. And the other piece is we've actually seen from the provincial and federal governments, in some cases, recognizing the important roles that municipalities play and the unique level of experience and expertise they have to actually say, we want you to help us. Let's actually work together on this. The Housing Accelerator Fund is actually a perfect example of that. There was a carrot, and we did. It was $41 million, which we're now deploying in ways that we think are going to get us affordable housing as quickly as we can. So the dollars come into the city, and then we, within a certain box, decide exactly how that's going to work best for us, whether it's funding, buying land, funding infrastructure for certain new housing opportunities, whether it's grants to housing providers and agencies and cooperatives. And we've played our role there. The provincial government, for example, on homelessness also came to us and said, you've got a level of expertise in your community about trying to site shelter locations, and you can either let us do it, where we'll just kind of run in and make a decision, or we can try to do this together and hopefully come up with a better solution in at least the short to medium term. And so we've played that role.
Where do the NGOs come into play here? Because the municipality can't do it all by itself. You need the residents' backing. You need the provincial government and the federal government to help you as well. Understandable. But from a local level, the residents of Saskatoon have to be on board to fight this issue, to address this issue. And the NGOs, the government organizations, need to work with the city to address this, because I'm going to, every time I hazard a guess, every time I assume on the show, I always get it thrown back in my face. But I would assume that the city is not building homeless shelters to house unhoused people, to get them off the streets, to get them a leg up, to get them into a proper affordable housing. That's where the nonprofit sector comes into play, doesn't it?
We have been engaged in some ways financially with helping to get shelter sites going, whether it's from our folks doing things off the side of their desk where we know that those are administrative and city resources and time.
I shouldn't have assumed.
All the way to thinking about the money that needs to go into, we've got a temporary shelter location that we're working on, and we kind of got in a spot where we're helping the province out on this. They've provided money. There was a gap in dollars because of the provincial election and some other pieces where just something needed to happen. And we said, we'll do it. I think we stepped up with $500,000 there. And we don't know if we'll be able to recover that. So we have certainly been engaged and involved with real dollars as well at this level. But when I think about this level of government, and I'll give an example here I'll actually talk about the office of the mayor. And I'll talk about this in kind of a 30,000 foot view, because most of Canada has a weak mayor system, which means that I don't need to explain it to you, Scott, but we know that sorry,
Chris.
So I'm sorry.
First time I've ever been called the wrong name on my show.
Well, you know what?
I look like a Scot.
No, you know what? You look like a guy who would, in fact, have a great saying or something where you'd go, "Great Scott," and you just have that, you have that aura about you, like you know what's going on, and sometimes you could just call people out on it, and that's how I imagine you saying it.
But yes, I am one of those weird people that understand that Toronto, Ontario does have a strong mayor power system for a small minority part of their municipalities, the larger urban centers, which gives for those who don't know, the mayor has the ability to move a budget, fire the CAO at will, and just needs a third of a council to adopt anything, not a majority, a third. So there you go.
Yes. Continue. So Christopher, the thing that in a weak mayor system, I've had a front row seat to understanding, and this is where I think our current mayor, and in fact our previous mayor, have been doing a good job, is to understand that, one, you have the ability, outside of just being your single vote, just like another member of council, you have the ability to drive a media narrative and to help shine a light on issues in your community. And you also have the ability to bring people together. You have the ability to convene. As the mayor of a city, you have the unique ability, if you call someone up and say, "Hey, I need you to come into my office," whether that person is the executive director of a not-for-profit organization, a business person, someone engaged at another level of government, let's say assistant deputy minister, or other people who are knowledgeable and engaged on an issue, to actually bring them together into the same room, you have that power. Because guess what? When you are the leader of a community, for the most part, people get back to you and people are willing to say yes. And that's, in fact, I think some of the leadership that we're seeing on these issues, outside of the advocacy, outside of being directly involved or tangentially involved in them, is we understand the power of bringing people together and finding solutions, because we're uniquely positioned, number one, to get everyone in the same room, but then number two, from just the simple fact that you are the leader of the community, to try to drive those solutions. And so that's when you bring up not-for-profits, that those are some of the ways that we engage. But we also have amazing staff here who play other roles behind the scenes. I can talk to you at length about the role that many of our amazing staff play in getting everyone around the table on, for example, the issue of homelessness. And we've got dozens of agencies that exist not only where they're providing great services to people, but our folks have built those relationships to really try to get things going in the same direction. And I won't get into all the details of our plan on homelessness and the work that's happening. We've got a report, I believe it's coming in April, that's outlining all the work that we've been doing, but all the work we're going to be doing to be playing those roles. It's impressive. And I know that this happens in other communities too, and a lot of it just is behind the scenes. So I appreciate you playing devil's advocate, but I would say we have that role to play.
Can I flip the script, the original question, on its head before I turn to my last subject here?
Of course.
What's the thing you are proud of when it comes to the city of Saskatoon? No one ever asks that question on these shows. And we always talk about the challenges that municipalities face. And it's understandable, because those are the things that are keeping us up at night. But what's the thing you look at and you say, you know what, we do have our challenges, but we have this going for us. We have X. What's that X factor that makes Saskatoon so great?
I'll answer this in two ways.
Go for it.
One is, I remember clipping a newspaper article from the Star Phoenix in 2000. I clipped it 25 years ago. I was 14. And it was written by a fellow who was here. I believe he was a physician. He was here for quite a few years, and he was talking about this city as he was getting ready to leave it. And he stated in his article that he was moving back home to Southern Ontario, not because he wanted to, but because for family reasons and aging parents, he needed to. He talked about all the things in the city he talked about the little gems in the river valley, the coffee shops, the bookstores, everything else, the friendliness of people, but he really talked a lot about community. He talked about volunteerism and all of those things. And this was at a time when Saskatoon and Saskatchewan were not growing. They were in the way that they are now. We often had this notion that we were less than or second to or third to other people in other places. And he basically said in this article that you shouldn't have to explain yourself to anyone, that this is an amazing place and it's got a lot to do with the people that are here. And there are all sorts of factors and things that go into that. Just even thinking about the role that our city plays in empowering community associations to provide programs in their neighborhoods, where in other cities, either they don't have them, or those are things where, you've just got city employees doing, a babysitting class or a cooking course or a floor hockey program. We actually work with community and empower volunteers to provide millions of dollars of value to community that doesn't exist in other places. And that people factor is really hard to put your finger on, but that is there. It is. The other thing, and the other way I'd answer that question, is that Saskatoon is at this it's really unique spot on the Venn diagram, where you've got this idea of a big city where people have things that keep them engaged and excited to live in a space, whether it's visiting an art museum, having great music, live events, concerts, shopping opportunities, all that kind of big city-ish stuff. But yet, I don't want to say the small town piece, because I think number one, it's an overused.
It's not a small town.
No, it's an overused term, but there's still a certain closeness and a certain element of community that really does exist here in ways that even similar sized cities I don't feel. So it's.
I'll just pick up on that for a second while you're thinking, because I was at Tim Hortons this morning, and that's what you do when you're on your convention touring. And I was sitting there and having my bagel and my coffee, and two gentlemen walked in and they go, "I haven't seen you in a week." And they just caught up. It seems like you always run into people in Saskatoon. And by the atmosphere that I found in every place that I've gone, one place excluded, it seemed like it was very upbeat and people just were friendly. And like the whole Saskatoon Shines thing, it truly does, because it seems like wherever you are, people are just happy to be here.
I think a lot of people really are. And yeah, we're at that, like I said, a little slice of that diagram where you have that sense of community, you have that sense of closeness, of neighborliness, but also a lot of the things, save for sometimes frustrating flight connections that hey, Air Canada, if you're listening, I want you to bring a Calgary flight back. That's super annoying.
Please.
Please bring it back.
7-hour drive was not fun. Calgary to Saskatoon, please.
WestJet, hey, you guys are kicking butt on that route, but Air Canada, you could bring it back. But, aside from some of those things where, yeah, it can be a pain in the butt sometimes to get to certain destinations by air. And hey, if I really, really want a Swedish designed flat pack bookshelf, I either have to order it online or I have to drive to Calgary or Edmonton. But aside from, yeah,
you're really going for the IKEA crowd, right?
Well, you know what? Actually, I'll just tell you really quickly. A dear friend of mine ran for parliament as an independent candidate almost 20 years ago in the 2005-2006 election. He got 0.9% of the vote, but one of the only promises he made, and it was in the context of a radio interview, is they said, "Hey, if you get elected, do you promise to get an IKEA here?" And he said, What the hell? Sure, yes. Of course, when you're only going to get 342 votes, you can kind of promise the world.
Yeah.
But aside from some of those things that maybe to some people that's a big deal, not having an IKEA or not having quite as many flight connections to international destinations, we do have those big things that happen here. The major events, we have an amazing art museum. We have a growing and really, really diverse restaurant scene. We've got people doing amazing art. You know, the number of times that you can in this city go and see stand-up comedy in a week by very, very talented people I would put it up against many, many larger communities across Canada. So yeah, that's my sales pitch. And that's the kind of thing that does make this place special. And it bears keeping in mind, I think, as representatives, to try to figure out what it is. And I don't even have a fully formed and good answer on that, but it's something I've always been asking myself. What are those X factors and decisions that might have been made decades ago that help contribute to that, not lifestyle, but the vibe that we build here, the community that exists? And I have a partially formed answer, but that's been part of my journey, is figuring out exactly what that is and perhaps how we share that with other people as well.
I have two final questions for you, and the last one is about a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I love touring. I think with everything that's going on globally right now, I think a lot more Canadians are going to be spending their tourism dollars here in Canada in their own backyard, which I am so happy about. As I told you, I'm going to be back here in about a month's time, and about twice in the month's time, one for the SUMA convention and one time just for personal travels. What are the hidden gems? You talked about the big things that Saskatoon's known for, the art galleries, the trails, but what's the hidden gems? What's the thing that you say, if you come to Saskatoon, you need to see this? What is that one thing? And I know I'm asking the Sophie's Choice here, but I'm going to ask you to pick one or two.
Of course.
And if you miss one, people are upset.
I know. So my email address is public. If you can send your hate mail.
Please send it to him this time, not me, because I get enough emails from people.
ward10@saskatoon.ca if I've missed your business and or attraction. Have you been out to Wanuskewin Heritage Park?
No.
Okay. Now, I've had the honor to actually serve on the board of directors there for quite a few years as a representative of the city. You've got a place where people have been gathering for 6,400 years and longer. If you get a chance to be in the Opimiha Valley and go for a walk, the sense of peace and tranquility that exists there is pretty special. That sense of being connected to not only the land, but to a very proud history of Indigenous peoples here in Saskatchewan and actually from around North America, because folks traveled that far to come to this place. That is worth checking out. The art gallery and the museum that's connected to it are absolutely, shouldn't be missed. And the food there is excellent. If you were trying to find a place that if you want to find bison, you can definitely get it on the menu there. And that actually is the only site in Saskatchewan that it's on the short list to become a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and in fact would be the first such site in the province of Saskatchewan, and is right next to Saskatoon. At some point, it will actually be in the urban boundary of our city. That's a special place. And
are you a spot that you go to? Well, to decompress?
You know what? One of the places that's really special, if you get a chance to be on that trail and to kind of actually go out to one of the vistas where the Opimiha Creek meets the South Saskatchewan River, you can see the city in the background, you can see some of the urban development, but you also see the entire valley and you see the interpretive center that's there. It's a pretty spectacular view. That's kind of special. There are parts of our river valley too where you just get great views out by the Diefenbaker Canada Centre, for example, by the Weir.
Before I leave tomorrow, I need to find that place because I heard that it's like one of the most fantastic places, and I have not been able to find it on a map. So
Okay, it's on the U of S campus. Actually, Diefenbaker and his second wife are both buried there as well.
what? Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I need to go.
Yeah, so you can go see his grave. But the center has a reproduction of what his office looked like when he was in office from 57 till 63. You can go in the old cabinet room, and they have reproductions of those. It's one of the really the only kind of prime ministerial center. One of the only prime ministerial centers in the country. And actually what Diefenbaker did is he donated all of his papers to the University of Saskatchewan. He had been chancellor there late in his time on this planet. And after he did that, Library and Archives Canada said, prime ministers, you're not allowed to give your papers away anymore. Like, they have to stay in Ottawa. Your documents stay here, because Diefenbaker was, basically, if you want to research his time as prime minister, you got to travel to Saskatoon, which I'm not sad about, but I think a lot of researchers and historians might be.
I'm going after.
So it's they might be closed for the day, but
the gravesite.
Okay, yeah, and it's a beautiful spot there too. You can see downtown Saskatoon. You can see just some of the untouched part of the river valley. It's a really beautiful place, and I encourage you to check that out. Didn't even realize I was going to get on that topic, but the other thing, are you a foodie?
I am.
Do you have
You don't get this size by not being a foodie.
Hey, you know what? I never want to assume a damn thing.
I heard from a delegate at the convention I'm at this week that there's a good Irish pub in town. And I was trying to figure out what he said. That's all he would give me was, you need to go find the Irish pub. I'm like, okay. So do you know of an Irish pub in town?
Here's a question. Would you say that a pub that has a mini leprechaun door next to the main door is an Irish pub? Probably.
As the political speak, I'm going to say that sounds like it would be something I would see in Ireland.
Okay, and I think there's a little sign on it actually. So on 2nd Avenue, there is a place called O'Shea's, and
he didn't tell me the name of it.
That would be. There are a few. There's a couple of kind of, I guess one's an English pub, one's Irish, and that would be the most Irish pub downtown is O'Shea's. But do you have a specific cuisine that you like, or a couple?
I'm a burger. If it's a nice juicy burger, that's where I'm like. Yeah, I'm Albertan, so of course I'm gonna like an beef burger.
Okay, my favorite burger in the city is at Congress.
Okay.
It's at the corner. It's just on 2nd Avenue as well, kind of near O'Shea's. And
so I'm going to 2nd Avenue. It sounds like.
It sounds like you are, and I love the burger there. I hope they haven't changed it too much, but typically they've got excellent meat, so they'll cook it medium for you, and really enjoy that. They've got kind of a spicy aioli on there. Really enjoy their burger. And another place that's really worth checking out is called Primal. And it's one of the places in Saskatoon that's pretty consistently ended up on the top 100 restaurants in Canada list. They're Italian, but they really take seriously the idea of keeping the ingredients local. So everything from fish to bison and other pieces. Obviously, lots of pasta. Their pizza's amazing, but it's only for takeout.
Ooh.
It's only for takeout.
Okay.
So I only tried it for the first time last year. I'm embarrassed to say, but that's amazing. And if I would also say Hearth in the Ramey Modern Art Museum is also worth checking out. It's also been on that top 100 list. They've done a really cool thing with the space. It used to be that it was a food operator out of Toronto that was doing it for the first 5 years of the art museum. It was kind of a cold space. It really didn't bring in community in the way that it does now. But you go to Hearth, they will serve you on mismatched china. There are plants in there. It's warm and cozy. They've got a beautiful big William Parahudoff painting.
Really?
Of course. Well, I mean, it's in the art museum. So, I guess you can make those things happen when you're actually co-located. But But it's just a really cool space, and once again, they focus on local ingredients. They're just actually the same with Primal. Their cocktail program and their mixology is top notch. And if you're not a drinker, their homemade root beer at Hearth, it is to die for. Have it as a float for dessert. You'll be happy.
When I come back for SUMA this year.
Yeah. So I also love food, as maybe you're noticing from my descriptions of it. And I would be happy to join you. Let's
do it.
Let's make it happen.
At SUMA, we'll go out and we'll grab a coffee, or we'll grab a nice pizza. Well, we can't do pizza, but we'll grab something.
But if we do that, then and I, buy a root beer float, that's my mea culpa for calling you Scott, Chris.
No worries. So my final question for you, and it's the $1 million question. We've talked about it yourself. We've talked about the city of Saskatoon. But what makes the city of Saskatoon such a unique place to live, to work, and to raise a family?
As I said, there's a sense of community, and I know everyone likely says that about their communities. So I know we're probably singing from the same songbook on that.
But I love to hear that, though.
But there is something special around the way that people step up, the way that people volunteer. I remember when I was a kid, the fact that we had been named the volunteer capital of Canada was something that I proudly would talk to people about. But that does exist here in ways that I'm even told by folks who haven't been here their whole life, that there's something special. There's something in the water other than fluoride that is making that happen. That obviously makes this a great place to live and to raise a family and to do all those things. But like I said, I'm the kind of guy, and I have said this to folks close to me, if I didn't live in Saskatoon, I wouldn't be living somewhere smaller. I would be living somewhere larger. I'd probably find myself in, like a Calgary or an Edmonton or a Vancouver. There are things about big cities that I'm attracted to, whether it's the food scene, the fact that there are lots of live events that are happening, just things to keep engaged and excited about life. And I've never found myself feeling wanting in Saskatoon. And I can't say that would always be the case in a city with really only 300,000 people. And we punch above our weight for securing national events, for the fact that we actually have one of the top 50 arenas in all of North America for the number of acts that come through and the money that they make. If I gave you a list over the last 20 years of the people who came through Saskatoon, you'd be blown away to say, okay, well, didn't know that they would make money or bother playing a city of 200,000 or 300,000 people, but they do. And those pieces,
center.
Yeah, there are all these things here that really do make this an excellent place to live. And I'm just deeply proud to be from here, to represent here. And I'm so glad that you came to visit us here at City Hall, Chris.
Well, Councillor, thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much.
Now, I want to thank everyone for tuning in for another episode of Cross Border Interviews. Now, if you've enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights into the world of Saskatoon local governance, be sure to hit that subscribe button now on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube, or follow us on social media at Cross Border Network. To learn more about the people and the communities that we feature on this show and our sister shows, be sure to head over to our website at crossborderinterviews.ca. Your support means the world to us, so share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your community, and help keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with a brand new episode of Cross Border Interviews next week. Till then, everyone.